Welcome to this episode of Learning Fusion. In today's episode, we're going to be covering part 2 of our camera tracker, where we're going to track some footage. We're going to export it out to Blender. We're going to add something in Blender. We'll export those renders and we'll bring them back into Fusion and just throw a quick little comp on it. We're not going to turn this into a comping video, but more on the tracking side. So let's roll this intro and let's get into it.
We're learning Fusion together. We'll learn 2D stuff and 3D stuff and particle stuff and compositing stuff, deep pixel stuff and tracking stuff, but not other stuff, but some other cool stuff, cause we're learning Fusion together.
So basically what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be tracking this stock footage here. So we've got this little stock footage and we're going to track it, and we're going to use our track so we can export some points. And with this, we're going to export these out to Blender, and we're going to use this as kind of our little scene to create stuff in Blender. And once we create it in Blender, we'll export it and we'll bring it back in, and we'll add something like a model or whatever you want to add to it. It's up to you. So this is basically in a nutshell what we're going to be doing today. We're going to take regular footage, track it, and bring it back in. So let's go ahead and delete all this stuff and let's get rolling. So I'm going to delete everything other than my media in. And the first thing I want to do is add a camera tracker. So shift space, camera tracker. We've got our camera tracker in. And this is fairly simple footage. We don't have anything we need to take out or block out or anything. There's nothing really moving in it. So if you want to see how we did that, be sure to watch the last Learning Fusion episode when we covered the basics of camera tracking, where we created occlusions to occlude stuff out. So this is going to be a pretty simple track. So let's go ahead and auto track and see what we got. And we want a lot more points than this. So we're just going to slam this down. We're going to slam this down, and let's go ahead and auto track again and see how many points we get. And that should be plenty, because some of the main things I really want to worry about is the floor and these pillars right here, just so I can have something for placement. And I actually might put this down to 1.5 maybe. Let's do, let's go a little tiny bit lower on this. Auto track, see if we get a few more. There we go. We're getting tons on the ceiling, which for just throwing something on the floor I really don't care about, but I'll show you how we can clean these up and minimize them. But for our actual track, we really want that many points in there. And I'm going to go to my options and turn my trails off. So once I've got that set up, I'm going to go ahead and go to my camera. And again, I don't know what the focal length of this is, so I'm just going to leave it as is. I'm going to go to my solve, and I'm going to go ahead and solve. And again, if you want some detailed info on how to use this tracker, use the different solve operations and the filtering and all that fun stuff, you can go to one of the camera tracker node breakdowns where I go in depth on all this stuff. So I'm going to track this. And again, remember, it's going to go up, go down, go back up to 100, go back down. It's going to take a while. So go grab a coffee, do what you got to do, and we'll be back when this is finished tracking. So there we go. We got a fairly decent track of 0.5. So we need to go ahead and clean some of this stuff up. And you can see we've got a lot of red and orange going on. So we're going to clean this up. And the other day we went through and physically selected each one and deleted. But today I'm just going to use my little max solve error button here. And I'm just going to start at 1. And I'm going to apply that. And once I apply that, I'm going to hit this delete here. So it's going to delete everything that is not at least 1. And once I do that, I'm going to hit solve again. So there we go. Now we're down to 0.28, which is pretty good. So we'll go ahead and go with this instead of solving again. I may, depending on what we're doing, resolve again, get rid of some of the other ones, maybe drop this down to 0.8, but that's pretty good. So from here, what we want to do is we want to go over to our export button. And we're going to drop this 3D scene transform. And what we need to do is we need to align some of our stuff here. So first I'm going to select Unalign to unselect everything. And we need to pick an origin point, meaning a middle point of our little scene there. And I'll probably just select this right here, right there in the middle, and hit Set from Selection. And now we got to select our ground plane. So let's go ahead and I'm going to hit all this stuff that's on the ground here. And I'm going to hold my Shift key and keep selecting everything that is on the ground. I can go to the end, see if I have some more, and select all these. And I'm going to hit Set from Selection. And once I set that, I'm going to select this aligned right here so it knows everything is aligned. And then I'm going to go down to my export options, and I'm just going to go ahead and export all this so you can see everything that it exports. And once I do, I'm going to select Export. And just like the other day, it created this little point cloud over here. Whoops. It created this little point cloud that we need to drag back over in our little node area here. So it created our camera, it created our point cloud, a ground plane, a merge, and a render node. So if I look at our little merge, and let's go to our point cloud and turn this into a point, and let's change the scale of our little points there. And this doesn't matter because we're going to have to do a couple little things to export these because we can't just export these out. But if we look at our merge here, you can see we've got our little scene. So we can clearly see we've got our little 2 columns there. You can see our floor, our ground plane is right there. So it's looking pretty good. And if I push play, you can see our camera is moving appropriately. So our scene's pretty good. Now, like I said, we can clean some of this stuff up if I don't care about all these points because our solve is done. Our camera track is done, so we don't need all these additional points. So we can go to our camera here. Let's look at the left side and let me zoom out. And we can see some of these arbitrary points down here that we really don't care about. So I can just select all these right here. Hold my shift, and if I want to get rid of a lot of this stuff up top, and basically what I'm doing is minimizing my points because we're going to have like 8,000 points going into Blender. So if I just select all these top ones and make sure I'm not selecting anything I really need, I can hit delete, and I just deleted all those points. So now I just deleted a couple thousand points that we don't need anymore. So I can go back to perspective and make sure I've got enough stuff going on there. And I probably honestly could delete more on the top here, but that's fine. We'll just go with that. So now to be able to export these out as FBX, we need to turn these point clouds into actual meshes. So to be able to do that, we're going to add a shift space, replicate 3D node. And we're going to go from our point cloud into the input of our replicate 3D node. And to be able to have a shape, we need to add a shape. So we can just drag a shape down. We're going to input it into our input 1 of our replicate 3D. We're going to turn this shape into a sphere. Let's make this 0.5 so it's not so large. And we're going to take our replicate and input it to our merge 3D. Now you're not going to see our actual replicate or our shape showing up until we go to the point cloud and you select this make renderable. And once I do, you can see our giant spheres there. So we probably should have made this 0.005 instead, because I think 0.05 would still be too big. Yeah, way too big. So 0.005. And all these are the points we're going to see when we export the FBX into Blender. That way we can see how our scene is built. So all these points will be exported into our FBX. Now, once we have that, we need to add an FBX export so we can export all this stuff. So shift space FBX exporter, and we're going to add it and it's going to ask us where we want to save our stuff. So I have my little camera tracker file here, and let's name this camera track. I'm gonna name this 02 because I actually created it already so I could show you an example. So this is going to be 02, and we're going to go from our merge into our FBX export. Now on here, we're just going to leave it as a FBX. You could change it to whatever you want to export it to whatever 3D program you want, but I'm going to leave it as a FBX. And I do want my geometry. I don't have any lights. I want my cameras, and I'm going to select this reduce constant keys. Once I do, I could technically go ahead and hit render all saves, but I want to add one more saver node because to be able to use this stuff, we want this footage within Blender. So what we could do is just after our media out here, I could hit shift space, add a saver node, and input a saver. And on my saver, what I want to do, remember this is only going to export to EXR. So I'm going to select browse, and I already created this, so I'll create a new one. So reference footage 02. Create a new folder, go in there, and I'm going to rename this to reference footage and hit OK. So now if I go to my Fusion here and hit render all savers, it's going to render both my reference footage and my FBX. And I will be back when it's done. So there we go. All of our savers are rendered. So we could just disconnect and we could delete these if we want. Or we could just stick them off to the side if you need to reuse them. Same with our camera tracker right here. Technically, we could just disconnect it and scooch it off to the side because we're pretty much done with that now. And we're honestly done with all this stuff because we're just going to bring our footage back in and connect it to our media. So we could just disconnect everything if we wanted to and just scooch it off to the side. And once we do that, we're going to go ahead and open up Blender. So I'll see you when we're back in Blender. So here we are in Blender, and we're just going to delete everything. And we're going to set up our little scene here first. So I'm going to go to my render tab, and just so you know, I'm not going to make this a Blender tutorial. So I'm just going to be walking through this. So if you got to pause and back up, that's fine. But I'm not going to explain every little thing I'm doing in here because this would get way too long. But I'm going to switch this to cycles render and my GPU. And under our little output here, I'm just going to change this to the output of our footage, which is in DaVinci Resolve. So that's going to be 3840 by 2160. And we only have 120 frames to render. And my project was at 30 frames per second. And then down here for our output, what we want to do is we want to set up two different folders for our output, because in this one, all I did is I output two different EXR files. So one, we want EXR, and on my actual passes, I just did it combined. I didn't do like I normally would do for compositing, because usually you would do all these independent. But again, I don't want to turn this into a compositing video. We will do that again later. So we will actually come back into Blender when we go over those lessons, and we'll export all this stuff as individual passes and recomposite it correctly in Fusion. So we're just going to do a combined pass, and we'll come back to this output when we're ready to output. So what we want to do is make sure we're on our collection. I'm going to go to File, Import, and we're going to import an FBX, and we're going to look for our little FBX that we exported out of Fusion. So that would be here in my camera tracker, and that would be camera track 2. And when I open this up, you're going to see it's extremely tiny. And I kind of did that on purpose because every single 3D program is going to be different. So how it imports. So in Blender, each one of these, I believe, is a meter. So 1 meter, 1 meter, 1 meter. And when we bring our little footage in our camera track, you're going to see it's extremely tiny. So there we go. It's in there. And you can see it's super, super small. And we can't deal with that. So I'm just going to delete all that and go back to File, Import, FBX. And this time we want to make sure we go over to the scale. And like I said, it's going to be different for every program you bring in, but I'm actually going to scale this up by 1000 for Blender for this specific scene. And like I said, it's going to be different for every 3D program, and it's going to be different for every scene you export out. So import at 1000 scale, and it's just trial and error to get the scaling right. So there we go. We've got our FBX imported at a better scale, because remember, this is a giant warehouse, so that's a little better. And if I push play, you can see we've got our camera moving. We've got like over 10,000 points here making up our little scene. We've got our ground plane over here. And then this over here that's moving is our little image plane that was created in Fusion. So we're going to clean this up so we can work with it a little better. So first thing, we don't need this image plane. So we can go to this image plane and we can check that eyeball and turn the renderer off so it's not rendering. And while we're up here, we're going to need a couple more of these little filters. So I'm going to click on this and I'm going to turn on my holdout and my indirect only arrow. So now I have these up here so I can check them and uncheck them. The next thing I want to do is I kind of want to control some of these points and turn them on and off, because this is why it's so slow, because of all these points that are there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my collection, new, and I'm going to name this points. And I'm going to select all these little shape 3D1 all the way through, I don't know, 10, 12,000. So from there, I'm just going to click and drag all the way down, hold shift, select them all. And yeah, there's 13,000. So let me go all the way back up, and I'm just going to drag and drop them into this folder. So now I've got all my points in this folder, and I can easily turn them on and off if I want. And I'm definitely going to uncheck this render because I don't want to render any of those points. So I'm going to shut these off for now. And if I hit my 0, you can see we're in our camera right here, and our camera is not set up right either. So what we definitely want to do is go back to DaVinci, and if we go to our camera tracker and we look at our solve, whatever size our focal length was solved at, that's the size our camera in Blender needs to be. So here mine says 25 millimeters. So I need to go back to Blender and select my camera, go to my camera settings and change this to 25 millimeters. So now it's going to fit right. Next thing I want to do is I want to put that background in there just so I have that film as a reference. So I can go to my background images, turn it on, add an image, select my open, and we will find our little EXR that we exported. So reference footage 2 by name. I'm going to select them all, open. Now we've got our reference footage in there, and your coloring is going to be off a little bit because, well, mine is, because my Blender's set up as ACES and we didn't export this as ACES. This is linear rec 709. So your color is going to be off, but it really doesn't matter because this is just reference footage. So if I go back and turn my points back on so we can see them, you can see all of our points are aligned to everything on our footage correctly. And again, if it's not, if something's a little wanky, that's because you didn't turn your focal length to be the same focal length as it was in your DaVinci Fusion solve. So let's go ahead and turn this ground plane off as well. So now we've got our footage in there and we can bring anything we want in there. So if you just want to bring shapes in there, you can import additional FBXs, but I'm going to bring in another Blender project. So I'm going to go up to collections and hit new, just because I like keeping everything organized. And I'm going to name this actor. And on my actor, I'm going to go to file, append, go to my 3D, and I'm going to find my little animated walking model there. Oops, go to my collections, all my collections, and append. There we go. We've got our little actor in there, and she's extremely tiny. So we're going to go ahead and change her scale up as well. So I'm going to go to my character and go to my scale, and I don't know, 2.5. And that may be a little better. If I zoom in here so I can see what's going on. There we go. We've got our little character walking across the floor. And her scale looks decent. Now from here, you want to build out your scene so all your lighting matches correctly. And there's numerous ways to do this. Ultimately, the best way to do it would be just to get a HDRI when you're on set, but this is stock footage, so we have no HDRI of it. So there's two ways to do this. You could either find an HDRI that is kind of ish the same, or we could actually build out these lights within this little scene. And if you wanted to build out your lights, we could add a new, rename this lights. So I could go here, add a light, and we'll just add an area light there. And let's rotate this so it's facing the right direction-ish for right now. And then we could take our little area light and we could just keep moving it until it's where it belongs. And let's change the scale up. Let's make it a little bigger. Move it way back to our Y because we know our light needs to be over here. And you basically change your lighting to where your lighting is. And you could do that for every single light up here if you want, or the windows where the sun's coming in. But I'm going to do it the easy way and delete all this. And I'm just going to add a little HDRI. So if I go to our world, I can select this little color button right here, select environmental texture, and I'm going to add, let's go to HDRIs, and we'll just add this little workshop there. Let's turn our points back off so it's a little faster. And let's hit our render button. And you can see our little workshop there, our lighting. And let's go ahead and grab another window. And on this, I'm going to go to shader editor, but select world. And I'm going to highlight this and hit Control T so I can add this little node here. And in here, we can rotate our HDR, not on the Y, on the Z, to get our light shining from where it needs to be shining, like back there somewhere. And then to be able to turn this off so we don't see it, all we have to do is go up here. We can go to our film and select transparent. So now that's not going to show up. And if I zoom in, I can continue to change my little HDRI so my lighting is facing the correct way. But now, mind you, we don't have any shadows really happening yet. We've got our ground plane off. And to get our shadows correct, one, we need to turn our ground plane on. So now you can see our ground plane is working. And first thing I want to do is go to this ground plane, go to the materials, and I'm going to get rid of this metallic, slam the roughness. I don't worry about the color because we're going to actually turn this ground plane off so we're not seeing the ground plane. But I'm going to use this ground plane to turn my HDRI so I can see where the shadow's coming from. And I kind of want our shadows coming from this area. So now I can go in here and move my HDRI around to find where my shadows are. I'm going the wrong way. You can see our shadows swinging around there. So there we go. We've got a shadow coming kind of from this direction. But to make sure this is only a shadow catcher and we're not seeing our actual floor here, on our ground plane, if we go to our object, we go to visibility, we can just select shadow catcher. So now it's going to mask all that out and we're only getting our shadows. So now if we zoom this out so we can see, you can see we've got our shadows on our little character there as she's walking. And there we go. We've got our shadows. And let's actually go ahead and move her so she's a little closer. So let's go back to our character. And we're going to move her a little closer so she's closer to the camera here. Walks in. There we go. So she's closer to the camera. And I do notice this pink is popping up from the color of our ground plane there. So that's why she's like a little pinkish. So if we go back to our ground plane here and we go to our materials, we can change this ray visibility if we want. We can turn on off all this little all this stuff. Oops, we need our camera. So just our camera and our shadows on. So that's all that's going to be reflected or ray traced off of that floor. So again, if you see, if we change that diffuse color on and off, we're getting that diffused color of that floor. But if we shut it off, we're not. We're only getting our shadows cast on the floor correctly. Now, other things you want to make sure you do, if you notice, we've got our shadow kind of going across our little area right here. And there's a couple ways you could do this. We could do this actually in Fusion. We could just mask that off, which would probably honestly be the easiest way to do it. But if you needed reflections to be reflected off some of the stuff, you could actually build this out right here within Fusion. I mean, within Blender. So we could go here, go to our collection, and let's add a new one. New collection. We're going to call this one Holdouts, because anything I want to hold out, I'm going to stick in this one. So here we could add a new cube, and we could just bring this up. Rotate it so it's about ish the same. And then we can start moving around and manipulating it as we need to. So we can change that scale and get it in place so it's matching up with our little area here. And that's pretty close right there. And on here, we could just make sure we select Holdout. So now it's going to hold out anything that's coming on this little ray trace area. And once we do that, we can also change our scale up a little bit so it's a little closer to what we need. And we can base it off how these shadows are working. And additionally, on these shadows, this is casting the shadow, but we don't want that. So same concept. We can go here and we can turn off our shadows, and we can turn off everything. So it's only a holdout. So there we go. We've got this holding out these shadows that are coming across. So as I move, you can see it's holding out these shadows. And of course, we'd want to get this a little better. So it's a little more the size of that little post. But you can see how that works. It's holding out anything on there so it's not being ray traced or it's not being rendered. So now our shadows are out of the way and we're good to go. So when it comes to rendering out our stuff, once we have everything straight, and this definitely isn't straight, but once we have everything set up correctly, we want to make sure we're rendering out our stuff individually. So we want to render out our shadows, and we want to render out our little character here independently. And now that I'm looking at it, shadows really don't matter, because if we look at this footage here, there really isn't any shadows from anything. I mean, there's slight shadows over here coming in, but they're so soft. But we still want some shadows to play with. But while we're rendering, we want to make sure we render these shadows independently and render our little character independently. There's multiple ways to do that. And again, I don't want to turn this into a giant compositing one, but I would normally create different view layers and just do one render, and it's automatically going to render my shadow view layer, automatically render my character view layer, and any other view layers I have. But today we're going to do this simple. So all we're going to do is we're going to set up 2 independent renders and render them independently. So to be able to do that, first you'd want to render out your shadow. So to be able to do that, on our actor here, we want our actor to actually have indirect stuff, because if we just turn off our render or shut off our actress, we don't have a shadow anymore. So we need that shadow there. So we're going to hold our shift button and select this indirect only. And if we do that, anything that the light's interacting or the ray tracing is interacting with is still going to be cast on other objects. So you can see we still have our shadow here. Same with our little holdout. To make sure this doesn't render, we can just make sure this holdout here is highlighted and it's not going to render. You can even uncheck this render so it's not going to show up in an actual render. And then to set up your actual file for your render, again, we're going to do this simple with the passes and only do a combined. And then for our output, we're going to go here, make sure we select Open EXR. And then you're going to want to select this and create a folder and name it shadows, or name it whatever you want, because we're going to render all of our shadows independently. Once you render all your shadows, which I think you'll find will take longer than rendering our character, but once you're finished rendering all your shadows, we want to set up our character for rendering. So all we have to do is go to our shadows, or our little ground plane here, and now we can just turn that off, hold our shift and uncheck this indirect only. So now only our little actor is going to render. Now, mind you, before you do all this stuff, you want to make sure you're turning this background off, because if we rendered our shadows out, it's going to render this background as well. So if you go to your camera, you just want to make sure you turn that background off before you're rendering anything out. But once you have that set up, you go ahead and render out your character the same way. You just go here, change your folder, create a folder just for your character, and then you're going to have all your renders for your character. And it should look something like renders. I've got my actor with all my renders for my actor, and I got my shadows with all my renders for my shadows. So 2 folders, 120 files per folder. Now, once all your renders are done, you're done with Blender. So the first thing we want to do is hit Shift Space at a loader node. So our loader node, and I'm going to take our actor and I'm going to just load all of our actor footage. So now we've got our actor in there. And she's a little dark because we exported as ACES and we are working in linear in here. So what I could do is just hit Shift Space at a gamut node. And on our gamut node, I'm going to go from ACES to sRGB. So now she's colored for the rest of this stuff. Or I could just simply leave my footage as it was and change my original media to ACES if I wanted to. So it's all up to you. There's no one way to do it. It's just whatever your workflow is and whatever your deliverable is going to be. Now we need to do the same thing with our shadow. So Shift Space and another loader node. And we're going to go find our shadows. So there's our shadows. And for some reason, it's named the same thing. So I'm going to hit F2 and rename this to shadows. And hit Control C, Control V, and paste our gamut node on our shadows. So now we've got our shadows in there. So we're going to bring in 2 merge nodes. And we're going to go from our media into our background of our first merge, and then our shadows into the foreground. So now we've got our shadows on our little footage there. And on the second merge, we're going to go from this merge to the background. And our actress here, we're going to stick to the foreground. So now we've got our actress in there. And this definitely needs a lot of work because it looks horrible. But all the rest of this is all compositing. And like I said, this really isn't a compositing video, but this is where your compositing starts coming in. So you would do different things to make your 3D footage look better or look correct for your normal footage. So doing things like bringing in a color corrector, we could add a color corrector. And since she has her own little alpha here, if we look at our alpha, she automatically has an alpha. We can pump that into our effects on our color corrector. So we can mask that off. And then we can go to our color corrector and we can start playing with stuff. Like I would definitely drop the saturation way, way, way down. And I would want to play with my gamma and my contrast maybe to not make it so contrasty and make it fit the footage a little better. Additionally, you can do things like add a blur node so it's not so pixelated. And then we can add a film look look, creator. There we go. Let's just pick a simple one. We'll go with our cinematic here. Let's look at what's going on. Let's shut this film gate off and knock our grain amount down so it's not so rough. So there we go. We went from our media in, tracked it all, went to Blender, created some 3D stuff, brought it back in. So now we've got our 3D elements back in Fusion. And this is where you would definitely want to get in here and comp this a lot better. And like I said, we'll be going over compositing in different lessons. But this is your camera tracking in general. And I said I was going to do like another one, but before I do that, I want to do one more when it comes to actual camera tracking and doing stuff within Blender, because I did forget to mention one thing I use this quite often for is for creating set extensions or creating sets with original footage. And it's different than bringing in little elements, stuff like creating sets. You have to have everything attached to your existing real world set. So it's a little different process and a little more intense when it comes to matching stuff up and creating points and creating different color points and different point areas. So I'm going to do that before we get into actual object tracking. Before I get into actual object tracking when we are like tracking a face or something like that. So I will see you in the next lesson. Have fun playing with it, and bye for now.